The studio lights of Jimmy Kimmel Live flared to life, casting a golden glow across the sleek stage as the iconic theme music blared through the speakers. The audience erupted in a thunderous wave of applause, their excitement palpable as Jimmy Kimmel strode out from the wings. His trademark smirk was firmly in place, a glint of mischief dancing in his eyes. Dressed in a tailored dark suit, he waved with casual confidence, letting the cheers wash over him before settling behind his polished desk. The room buzzed with anticipation, the crowd primed for a night of sharp-witted humor and unfiltered jabs. "Welcome, everybody," Jimmy's voice rang out, cutting through the noise with practiced ease. "We've got a special treat tonight, straight from the White House. It's Press Secretary Karoline Levitt." The applause swelled again, though it carried a mix of curious whistles and murmurs. Heads turned as Levitt emerged, her presence commanding attention. She wore a crisp navy dress that hugged her frame, its clean lines projecting authority and poise. Her blonde hair shimmered under the studio lights, and her sharp gaze swept the room, lingering on Jimmy for a fleeting moment before softening into a polite, measured smile. She crossed the stage with purpose, taking her seat across from him, her posture rigid, hands clasped tightly in her lap, clearly bracing herself for what promised to be a fiery showdown. Jimmy didn't waste a second. Leaning forward, his elbows resting on the desk, he flashed a grin that hinted at the storm to come. "So, I was just scrolling through Truth Social, you know, that wild corner of the internet where Trump reigns supreme, and guess what? He's been tweeting about me. Seems I'm living rent-free in his head, even at the oddest hours. I guess tonight's going to be a blast." The audience roared with laughter, a few fans shouting in delight as Jimmy's grin widened. "Karoline, he's calling his new tariffs Liberation Day. Liberating what, exactly? Because I heard Melania liberated herself from him just last week." The room exploded, laughter bouncing off the walls as the crowd clapped and hooted, feeding off his biting energy. Levitt's frown was immediate, her lips pressing into a tight line, but she maintained her composure with steely resolve. She leaned slightly forward, her voice cutting through the din with a firm edge and a flicker of defiance. "Jimmy, maybe you should stick to comedy instead of making up stories. That's fake news, and you know it." Her tone was sharp, almost daring him to push further, and it drew a handful of nods from the audience, though most were still chuckling at Jimmy's jab. Jimmy tilted his head, feigning a look of exaggerated surprise. "Fake news? Oh, come on, Karoline. So who sent Melania a burger instead of roses? Was it you, or was it Trump himself?" The crowd burst into a mix of applause and laughter, punctuated by a few whistles as the studio vibrated with energy. Levitt's eyes narrowed, a flash of irritation crossing her face. But before she could fire back, Jimmy pressed on, his voice dripping with mischief. "No, seriously, I've got a hot tip straight from the White House. And trust me, it's hotter than the burger Trump sent Melania. My source says she quietly slipped out right after the inauguration. Why? Because Trump was too busy plotting tariffs to remember their anniversary." The audience erupted again, laughter crashing through the room like a tidal wave as Jimmy raised a hand, slipping into a theatrical Trump impression. "Melania, honey, I'm busy liberating America. Here, take a Big Mac and enjoy the show." Levitt's frown deepened, her lips now a razor-thin line as she fought to keep her cool under the relentless onslaught. The crowd was eating it up, their cheers egging Jimmy on as he leaned back with a sly grin. I even heard, and this is gold, that Trump called Melania the CEO of Leaving Me in a closed-door meeting with his advisors. Now that's what I call Trump-style romance. Who needs roses when you've got fast food? He pretended to rummage in his suit pocket, pulling out a folded scrap of paper with a flourish. I've got the memo right here. Oh, wait, my bad. That's just a McDonald's receipt. Levitt finally snapped back, her voice cold but steady, slicing through the lingering chuckles. Jimmy, do you really think your audience is dumb enough to believe that nonsense? That's cheap clowning, not the truth. She crossed her arms, her piercing stare locked on him as if trying to dismantle his smirk with sheer willpower. The crowd quieted slightly, sensing the shift in tension, but Jimmy didn't flinch, his confidence unshaken. Oh, I don't know if they're dumb, he shot back with a casual shrug, but I'd bet Trump thinks Melania was dumb for sticking with him as long as she did. Thunderous applause broke out, punctuated by approving whistles as the audience fueled his momentum. Seriously, Karoline, are you the one delivering the burgers? Or is that J.D. Vance's gig? I hear he's pretty good at running errands for the big guy. Levitt's grip tightened on the arms of her chair, her knuckles whitening as her eyes flashed with barely contained anger. Yet her professional demeanor held firm, a testament to her discipline. Jimmy, you can laugh all you want, she said, her voice rising just enough to betray the strain. But the president is out there working for America, not sitting here spinning fairy tales like you. The room buzzed, the battle lines drawn, as the audience leaned in, eager for the next salvo. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio hummed with tension as Jimmy leaned back in his chair, his smirk unwavering despite Karoline Levitt's sharp retort. The crowd was still buzzing from her defiance, a mix of scattered claps and murmurs rippling through the seats. Jimmy nodded mockingly, his tone light but laced with a cutting edge. Yeah, working for America. Like that time he accidentally sent war plans to a reporter instead of a love note to Melania, right? The audience erupted in laughter, the seats practically shaking, as the band punctuated the jab with a quick, playful riff. Here's the deal, Karoline. You keep saying it's fake news, so how do you explain Melania not showing up with Trump in public all week? What's she doing? Hiding out with a burger stash somewhere? The crowd roared, their laughter echoing as Levitt exhaled sharply, her eyes shifting from defiance to a blazing fury. Jimmy stepped closer to his desk, picking up a water glass as if to cool the escalating heat, then set it aside with a grin that promised more trouble. I don't want to put you on the spot, Karoline. Well, maybe I do. But I heard Trump posted on Truth Social recently. Not to defend you, mind you, but to yell at Melania for not posing for pictures with him. He slipped back into his Trump impression, voice booming with exaggerated bravado. Melania, you're terrible at this photo thing, but Karoline, she's great, the best. The audience howled, the energy surging as Levitt sprang from her chair in a sudden dramatic move that drew a collective gasp. Her fists clenched at her sides, her fiery gaze locked onto Jimmy with an intensity that silenced the room for a heartbeat. Jimmy, you think you're so clever, making up that garbage? Her voice cut through the air, sharp and resounding, dripping with righteous indignation. You make a living sitting here, laughing at people, tearing them down for cheap applause. But President Trump? He's working day and night to save America from people like you." Jimmy raised an eyebrow, his smirk holding steady, but Levitt barreled forward, her passion spilling over like a dam breaking. "I gave birth 9 months ago, Jimmy, 9 months. And 4 days later, I was back on the job, working for him. Do you have any idea what that means? I've poured my entire life into the president's mission. You think I'd be this loyal to someone who doesn't deserve it?" She took a step toward him, her voice rising with raw emotion. "While you sit here mocking him with your tired burger jokes, he's out there fighting to bring jobs back to American workers. Real people, Jimmy. People you clearly don't give a damn about." A pocket of the audience broke into loud applause, swept up in her fervor, their claps ringing out like a rallying cry. Others shook their heads, murmuring among themselves, still tethered to Jimmy's humor. He leaned against his desk, pretending to wipe sweat from his brow with an exaggerated flourish. "Wow, Karoline, I'm touched. Really, I am. But I'm not laughing at workers. I'm laughing at Trump's burger obsession. I mean, if he's so keen on bringing jobs back, why not just open a McDonald's franchise in the White House? Jobs solved." Laughter thundered through the studio, the band adding a cheeky riff as the energy soared to a crescendo. Levitt stood her ground, arms crossed tightly, her eyes narrowing into daggers. "Laugh all you want, Jimmy, but Americans aren't stupid. They know who's really working for them, and it sure as hell isn't you." Her voice slowed, weighted with conviction, each word deliberate. "Look at what the president's done. These new tariffs, they're not a punchline. They'll protect American workers, bring manufacturing back from the hands that stole our livelihoods. And you want to talk about Melania? That's personal, Jimmy. You've got no right digging into it just to score laughs." Scattered applause rose in her defense, but the majority of the crowd stayed with Jimmy, hanging on for his next move. He nodded, feigning a moment of agreement, then leaned in with a sly grin. "Yeah, I've got no right. I'll give you that. But Trump? He's got every right to post rants at 3 a.m., yelling at everyone, including Melania, right?" Levitt's response was swift, her voice nearly a shout as she stepped closer, pointing a finger at him. "You don't get it, Jimmy. You don't understand the pressure of the White House because you've never left that cushy little couch to do anything meaningful. You sit here mocking a man who's beaten every odd to lead this country. Could you do that? Could you even try?" The studio fell silent for a split second, the air thick with tension as Levitt seized the moment. "President Trump is the strongest man I've ever met. He doesn't melt like you keep saying. He stands tall, and I'm damn proud to stand with him." Jimmy smirked, unfazed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The strongest? Really? So why does he melt like a popsicle every time Putin tosses him a compliment? I bet Putin's sending him burgers, too. Fancier ones, maybe with caviar." The room exploded again, the laughter shattering the tension Levitt had built, the crowd fully back in Jimmy's corner. "Karoline, you're loyal. I'll give you that much," Jimmy continued, his tone softening but still sharp. "But if Trump's so strong, why are you the one here defending him from a funny guy like me? Shouldn't he be able to handle this himself?" The crowd roared, some jumping to their feet to cheer, as Levitt clenched her fists, her eyes blazing with fury. "I'm here because I won't let you, or anyone, smear a man who's done so much for this country," she said, her voice trembling with emotion but never breaking. "You want to talk about Truth Social? That's how he talks straight to the people. Something the media, people like you, absolutely hate." She stepped back to her spot, refusing to sit, her stance a defiant statement against the storm of laughter. Jimmy raised his hands in mock surrender, his grin widening. "All right, Karoline, you win this round. I'll give you that. But I'd bet my last dollar Trump's tweeting right now to thank you for taking the heat." The audience laughed hard, applause mixing with whistles, signaling the battle was far from over. The stage was set, the tension crackling like a live wire as both sides dug in for the next round. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio pulsed with energy as Jimmy leaned against his desk, his mischievous grin intact, despite Karoline Levitt's fierce stand. The crowd was electric, split between her fiery resolve and his unrelenting humor. "Folks, I've got to hand it to Karoline. She's loyal as they come," Jimmy said, his tone light but cutting. "But loyalty doesn't mean right, does it?" The audience laughed loudly, a few shouting, "That's right," as the vibe tilted back toward him. "Karoline, you say Trump's strong, fighting for America. So how do you explain his team sending war plans to a reporter by mistake? What kind of fight is that, against themselves?" Laughter erupted, the band chiming in with an upbeat riff that lifted the mood higher. Levitt's eyes flashed with irritation, but Jimmy didn't let up. "I've got a source, not fake news, mind you, saying Trump's team accidentally added a reporter to a secret chat. They're talking about bombing somewhere, and boom, the whole world knows." He mimed dropping a bomb, then feigned shock. "I thought Trump was a master negotiator. How'd he turn into the master of sending the wrong texts?" Levitt took a deep breath, her voice icy and controlled. "Jimmy, you're making up stories for laughs again. That's not true, and you know it." But Jimmy stepped closer to the crowd, hands raised like he was sharing a juicy secret. "Not true? Then why's the whole country laughing at that chat blunder? I bet Trump sent Melania a love note in there by mistake. 'Honey, I'm busy bombing. Here's a burger.'" The audience howled, some slapping their knees as the laughter rolled on. "Seriously, Karoline, if your team can't handle a group chat, how can they handle America?" Levitt crossed her arms, her eyes like knives. "You want to talk handling? The president's handling the economy, bringing jobs back. Something you'll never understand. What you call a scandal is just media like you twisting the truth to take him down." A few clapped in support, but most stuck with Jimmy, awaiting his next jab. He shrugged mockingly. "Yeah, I don't get the economy, I'll own that. But I do get that sending war plans by mistake isn't how you bring jobs back." Pivoting smoothly, Jimmy grinned wider. "Oh, and Karoline, did you hear Trump wants to host the Kennedy Center Honors? Says he'll make it greater than ever. I'm picturing a burger auction. Phantom of the Opera? Nah, Phantom of the Big Mac. Trump hates Hollywood, hates artists. So why's he crashing that party? Is he rolling up with 600 cheeseburgers on stage?" The crowd burst into laughter, picturing the absurd scene. Levitt hit back at Jimmy's burger jabs, defending Trump's strength and tariffs, dismissing scandals as hoaxes. Jimmy mocked Trump's slip-ups and Melania's absence, sparking laughs and ex-buzz. Levitt stood proud. Trump tweeted praise, highlighting a split crowd. Humor versus loyalty.